That was Voce Immobile by Fusion Kuxel, performed by clarinetist Horia Dumitrachi. And we apologize for the technical interruption midway through that piece. We trust that it didn't take too much away from your enjoyment of what's a really vigorous performance of a very gripping piece of music. And we're very happy to have Fusion joining us here this evening via video link. Good evening, Fusion.
Hello, good evening.
So I have a couple of questions for you from the performer, clarinetist Horia Dumitrachi. Before I ask them, I just wanted to ask an anecdotal question. Is there an autobiographical element to the inspiration for this work? Have you experienced sleep paralysis?
It's a good question. No, not actually, but it's actually generally, maybe we can understand the sleep paralysis here as a metaphor. It's generally a little bit about not being able to speak, basically. So that's this heavy feeling of it, and it's basically that you want to say something but you cannot, and the heavy feeling of that thing, actually.
No, it absolutely came through, the wider applicability of that state to
Probably,
general states. And I really felt the kind of mind-body duality was very well expressed and achieved in that work.
Yeah.
So I'll
Thank
go
you.
to the questions now from the performer, Horia Dumitrachi. So the first question, in Horia's words, for me, this piece is almost like an artistic movie. It presents very clearly, as if on screen, emotions, knowledge, and self-confidence. It also uses extended techniques that work very well on the bass clarinet. It seems that before you start a composition, you prepare for it quite a lot. So has it happened for you, like Brahms, for example, where you start a symphony and you end up with a piano concerto? Or in other words, in the composing process, given all of this preliminary work, could the same source inspire more than one piece?
Wow. What a substantial question. Yes, especially when I write for a solo, I mean for a single instrument, for a solo instrument, I try to explore its full potential in many ways, like in terms of timbre, in terms of technical possibilities, and in terms of bass clarinet, it's very, very rich. As I mentioned also in this presentation, it can sing, it can be very lyrical, and at the same time, it can be very, very percussive instrument. So this is, of course, the technical part of the whole thing. And as I compose, I'm very much aware of the fact that I'm not the only authority who is manipulating the sound, but also the sound coming from the instrument manipulates me. So it's a kind of a dialogue between me and the instrument. And then if that happens, I mean, I really wait for that moment to come. If and when that happens, I think it means that I know the instrument from inside. So it's maybe about more internalizing things. So yes, there's basically some research part, but then there's some kind of, I think, like digestion part. Maybe, I don't know, things have to settle down, and so there's this part, and there's also the part if I have chance, I try to work with the performer, and that was the case also in this piece. So we collaborated with Richard Haynes, and there were also things I learned from him. And this, and also this piece is a follow-up of another piece which involves bass clarinet and percussion. So this, I think, applies also Horia's question, the second part of the question. Yes, and so basically in this piece, I developed a lot of elements I tried in the first piece for bass clarinet and percussion. So, and interestingly, recently I composed a large ensemble piece, Quelled, its name. And in that piece, I also used lots of elements from this bass clarinet piece. So yes, I revisit the material I use a lot, actually.
Very interesting.
Yes.
One thing I noticed as well, I don't know if you were deliberately making a reference to the tradition of which you're a part and an inheritor, the Boulez title Explosion Fixe. It seemed like, I didn't know, was that a deliberate allusion? Or?
Yeah, I mean, this is, I don't know, in my case, whether it's a style thing or, I know I don't take existing pieces and extend them. I think what Boulez does is different in that sense. But if I feel like a vocabulary element is something I feel close with, or is something I discovered, or not discovered, but I kind of, which represents me, then I use them a lot, actually. I make them, like, I internalize them, and why shouldn't I go back, and why basically, I like thinking about them again, maybe from different perspectives. So, yeah.
Okay, and just one final question, and I guess maybe this one is in brief. Horia asks, the traditional instruments of a country have an immense potential for expression. Have you thought of composing then for traditional Turkish instruments or other ethnic instruments from other countries? And if so, what artistically is your attitude towards this?
Okay, no, I didn't write for a traditional instrument yet. Yes, I mean the folkloristic or traditional instruments from this geographical part of the world has a huge variety of sound types and expressivity, and I think these sounds are also themselves they're also expressions themselves. That's kind of interesting. And I mean, in terms of relating my work to that part of the world or from Anatolia, let's say, I think I find this single line, melodic lines very powerful in traditional Turkish music. And they have this interesting structure. They have specific intervallic patterns, intervallic structures. And there are like melodic cells with limited number of pitch classes, but you visit the same pitch kind of irregularly, and it gives a sense of an insistence, and it gives a sense of a very natural flow that I think it belongs to my kind of extended family of vocabulary that I use. So, yeah.
Very interesting. Well, thank you very much for joining us this evening and
Thank you.
Presenting your music to us. And yeah, we look forward to hearing more from Füsen Köksal.
Thank you for inviting me, and it was wonderful being part of this great event. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So now turning to our last composer of the night. The composer is Aniesnur Benlahab, and we're delighted to have her here as a live guest. The piece we will hear from her is Eve for marimba, composed in 2017, and it will be performed on video by Michael Weilacher. Just a brief biographical summary first. Aniesnur Benlahab is a musician, composer, and painter born in France in 1996. Her hybrid works link different arts, and each invention is driven by deep human commitment. Her artistic work is influenced by the intersections of her multicultural identity. She studied classical guitar and ballet at the Conservatoire de Montpellier, continued her studies at the Université de Toulouse, Jean Jaurès, and at the Conservatoire de Toulouse, and also studied jazz in the band of the saxophonist Abdou Salim. Currently, she lives in Berlin, where she is doing a master's at the Hochschule für Musik Hans Eisler. Her passion for transdisciplinary creation has led to many collaborations, and she's been played at several festivals in Europe, including Kontakte 2019, Biennale für Elektroakustische Musik und Klangkunst, the Biennale de Musique Exploratoire Lyon 2020, and Bypass Forum de la Création Musicale 6. So now let's hear Eve for solo marimba, composed by Aniesnur Benlahab, performed by Michael Weilacher. That was Eve for solo marimba by Anius Nurben, performed by Michael Weilacher. And the dancing rhythms that were very much present and palpable in the slowing down and speeding up in the early parts of that work were then wonderfully brought into the body of the performer altogether appropriately towards the end. So now we'll have a video presentation from Anius Nurbenlahab, who we have joining us here at KNM 28 about her music.
Good evening, bonsoir à tous. So thank you very much for inviting me, and thank you a lot for the wonderful interpretation of Michael. I will start by introducing my work, the work you just heard. So this piece, I composed it 3 years ago when I started my researches on movement, on all the transdisciplinary work that I now develop more further the year. So first of all, this piece, Éveil, Awakening in English, it's a piece of contrasts. The contrasts are present in every level, in every step of the work. First of all, the sounds, of course, the sonority really sophisticated of the marimba and all the differences of timbre that we can reach with the marimba, putting in contrast with this dirty sound of barbecue grill, which is obviously not association that we will think in the first way, but then contrast each other and give a kind of deepness and lighting the true difference. So the contrast is also in the temporality. This piece is built on a 2 or 3. The third temporality is a bit less visible, but the 2 temporality of some energy dynamic really present, and some other temporality really extending and pushes until the extreme. I remember that at the moment of this composition, I was listening a lot of Japanese music. I discovered the art of gagaku, so the traditional Japanese music from the theater. And I was amazed by this capacity of extending the time, and the temporality goes more and more. And we have the ability to adapt really fast to this kind of temporality, which are completely different from our cultural Occidental music. So there is absolutely not a Japanese influence in the harmony, in the music, but this idea of temporality was growing in my mind, and I took inspiration from this with the super long rallentando and the very extending end that make us in a kind of waiting of what's and preparing what is going to happen just right after. The second really important thing of this piece is, of course, the movement. As you can see, it's not a piece to hear, but also a piece to see. And it's really important because it's not random gesture or gesture made after like a choreography, but the gesture impulse the music, the gesture build the music, and all the gesture are related to musical identity and material. This gesture are of course conditioned by the instrument itself, the marimba, that I take the marimba as a stage. It is already a stage. It imposes space, it has a corporality really different from a lot of other instruments that we can appropriate with our body. So this was really interesting to reach the body in relation with this little theater, which is the marimba. So I would like now to speak about the collaboration I made in this, for this piece. I collaborate also with a graphist, graphist, which made this gravure, engravement, that you can see now in the PDF. So this is the first page. We worked together. You can see the three parts correspond each to one movement of the piece you just heard. So this is the first. Then you have the second and the third. So we worked together also on the movement. So it was really interesting to work first on the movement, me with the score, then the score with the artist, and then all the thing taken together to put it again on the paper. So, Noah, I would like to talk to you about the most recent work I made, where I continued working on the body's research and linking body with musical things. It was really interesting to work with big puppets, as it is the perfect instrument to make this research. It's in the same time an instrument, and at the same time it represents the body and has the movement inside. And I was really amazed to discover, when I read this piece, Ardeur to Dance, for trumpet, electronics, and big puppet, that it works exactly like an instrument, but with movement. So you can see 3 persons are moving the puppet, and the relation with the trumpetist, of course, was all the work was to build the relation between this movement of the trumpet, sound movement, and the movement of the puppet itself, moving in real. So I will show you an extract of a video. Really shortly. Yeah, it's really short, just to have an idea of how it works. So this is one work I won't develop for a matter of time, but this is one work I made through this instrument puppet, which is like the symbiosis of both things I was at this moment researching. Then this is the sketch of this piece. So I made it before creating the piece, and it's already, you can see the sketch before writing already has movement in the drawing. So that's how I deal with movement. It's first come in my mind through image, through drawing, through material and graphic material. Then I translate it in music, and then I translate it with the body, which is the intermediary with the public, which receive this movement. So it's a continuous chain of movement. Now I would like to show you a last work that I made. So this is more radical because I really used a body. So the body is in the same time the instrument and in the same time the interpret as also instrument. So this piece is called Corps Criant, and I made a really big researches on how the body is sounding, literally. So it's, of course, a metaphor of expression, like how we express ourselves, how we deal with expression, what means to speak, what does it mean to move, what are we communicating with our movement and expression, and I researched it through this piece. So you can see a few pictures. And this is a score. So the score is entirely graphic. We can see the electronic, because it's a piece for electronic and body, and called screen body, corps criant in French. So you can see everything is about the movement and the graphic representation of the electronic. And I think we can see the relation between the movement of the electronic and the movement of the body and the score. So I will stop here. Thank you very much for listening to my presentation, and yes, thank you.
So now we have a question and answer session, a discussion between Anaïs Benlahab and performer Michael Weilacher, who made the video that you just saw. So, Michael.
Good evening. It's a pleasure to be here. It was a pleasure to work with you on your piece. I had a few questions that I wanted to ask you. The first question, though, I think you basically answered most of the points that I was going to present tonight in this interview with you and talk with you. But I would like to ask you something about your musical background, that being that you are trained as or still are trained as a classical guitarist, as a dancer, and also studied improvised music or jazz saxophone. So I would like to ask you, what brought you to start composing in general?
Okay. Well, the thing is, I studied really different things, dance, as you say, like all the things you said. And it was a necessity for me to do all the things and to find a way to put the thing all together and to use it as one thing. And I found this in the composition through the transdisciplinarity through composition, because this is amazing. Like, we have so much tool, we have all the freedom, and we can use all our knowledge, and we're like, human is really complex. Human being is really complex and has all this sense and all this. And it was, for me, a wonderful discovery, especially with electroacoustic music, because I saw in this the potential to link all the things I learned in all this really different arts through this point.
One thing that's a bit unclear to me, because as you stated and as we can see on your website, you have studied a few different instruments, dance as well, movement, some traditional music, I'm assuming, as well as classical and contemporary forms of music and visual art. But what is still not clear to me is, have you, or do you have a traditional artistic education, or have you learned, where have you learned?
Yes, so this is, I have third culture, so my father come from Morocco, and I didn't grow up in Morocco, but I was really interested in this culture. I know it since I'm little, and recently, I didn't study it when I was little, but recently I took more interest in the traditional music from Morocco. So I studied the Gnawa music. It's people from North Africa present in Morocco, and it's really interesting music and culture because it has a really different vision of music. Music has a different function. Music everything is different, and this opened my mind as composer. It literally opened my mind because the music is a cure. The music is something essential to live, and it's a medicine. It's something like that. It's not only that, but then this was a big source of inspiration. So I wrote for this instrument, the qabat code is like castagnette, traditional castagnette. I wrote for this instrument, and now I'm leading a big project in Morocco in order to lead the contemporary music and of our Western Occidental culture with this traditional music, which has a big potential as is music, oral music, complete oral music, and it seems really far from our music, but actually when we bring it together, and especially through the medium of electroacoustic, it has big potential, and I believe it's something really interesting.
It's interesting that you bring up Gnawa music. I have some experience with musicians that I've worked with in Belgium. Most of them have grown up in Belgium. Some of them were born in Morocco. Just a quick question, of course, it's a standard question. If you talk about the oral culture, in this case also the Gnawa culture in Morocco, how do you see that in terms of developments, in terms of changes of the tradition through a diaspora of those musicians and artists like yourself who have grown up in Europe? Mm-hmm. Do you see do you see the possibility of developing that? Are they, in certain cases, open to the idea of changing the Gnawa tradition at all, or?
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's not about changing at all. It's more about creating something new in association and imbrication of the music. And I think we have to, like, we need to exchange. We need to exchange our knowledge, our tradition. And for example, what could bring really concretely this capacity of oral music is a new listening, new listening and also a new form of writing. Because, for example, now in contemporary music, we are researching in this writing process, in this writing, how to write new, how to like communicate our idea. And with the complete oral music and complete writing music, then we are forced to find in between something which is mixed, something which is, and personally, I don't know if it has a musicologic efficiency, what I'm going to say, but personally it's really efficient for me as I work with graphic, with drawing, with the graphic sign, with all the thing, because the graphic is not a language, is not something that we agree with the intersubjectivity. It's not something that we say this sign, we recognize it as one sign and we agree on it. It's something else. It's called of course, our cultural background and education and everything, but it's also called, I think, another thing, which is related to the movement and to the instinct, I think. So it's called this graphical. For me, I see here the place for graphical writing to arise and to take this place.
Do you see, just quickly, in terms of course, the visual art and how you work with the material, now you work also, I mean, you said you were working with traditional musicians in Morocco, and now you've worked with me in this case. What do you think the difference is in terms of your relationship to the musicians? So how is that different when you work with a percussionist who perhaps can't read, doesn't matter, and somebody like me who then is interpreting a quite strictly, in this case, composed piece without very much improvisational
Okay,
elements?
so it will be a bit difficult to answer this question, as I never worked now with traditional Moroccan in a sense, or I composed a piece for him. I was a student, so I just learned. But it will come, and at this moment I will answer you with great pleasure.
Just the last question, in terms of improvisation, do you think you'll develop your music and art in terms of your compositional structures using improvisation in the future as well? Do you think
Yes,
that's
sure.
a very big aspect in your work?
Yeah, it is, and it will be forever, of course, because to compose, I need to experiment. And the experiment is whether it's through the improvisation myself or with the interpret. But the principle, like if we go to the base of electroacoustic, it's in the studio with two bamboo and trying the two bamboo and all the sound that we can take from this two bamboo, or like this marmalade pot or whatever. So this is at the base, it's experiment, it's for me, it's a concrete sound. It's finding the material is already improvising. And then the improvisation can come in several ways, of course, in the different step of the work, and also being used as tools in the piece, like with more or less freedom, with more or less. Then this is also a compositional choice, but it is at the base. It's at the base, like it's experimenting. The sound is improvisating. I believe it is. For me, in my work, I use it like that.
Okay, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you
It was a
very
pleasure.
much for your interpretation and your
Welcome.
really good question.
Okay, so thank you to performer Michael Weilacher and composer Anias Nur Ben Lahab for that discussion. And that brings us to the end of the second evening of KNM Contemporaries Music in the Making 2020, and we're delighted that you could join us this evening for performances by composers Anda Kreutziu, Füsen Köksal, and Anias Nur Ben Lahab. And they all brought different perspectives onto this year's theme of alone. But if there's one unifying element this evening, I suppose it was the element of physicality or corporeality. And it's quite appropriate in a year when we haven't been able to be together as much, that we're reminded of the importance of physicality and embodiment in music. So tomorrow evening's concert will be the final one, and we present works by Catherine Lam, Matti Heinonen, Emre Dündar, and Hongju Young. And we hope you can join us then at 7 o'clock. Good night.